Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're doing another listener request. Somebody essentially requested, this is from George Villalobos, says, awesome video, can you do a Tom Brady versus Aaron Rodgers? Is Tom Brady really an outlier? Now, as far as Aaron Rodgers goes, I already did a analytics profile on Aaron Rodgers versus Alex Smith, specifically talking about their draft class. But I figured, you know what, let me just do an individual Tom Brady analytics profile just to have it out there and just to refer to when people say that analytics doesn't matter or your analytics would not have liked Tom Brady. There's a lot of one of the main criticisms or comments I usually get is your data. If we were going by your data, then we would have missed on Tom Brady or whatever, which isn't the case. And I'm going to show you that Tom Brady coming out of college actually looked really good. And a lot of the main sort of criticisms of Tom Brady coming out in the draft class, based more so on athleticism ability or athletic ability, are just not that great arguments to make at the quarterback position because there's no correlation between athletic ability and quarterback play. So most of the data just points towards the fact, do you have good production? Are you a fairly good character guy? And that's pretty much it when it comes to data. The one thing I will say, though, with Tom Brady is he's a very interesting prospect because he's getting towards the end of his career. He's going to be 40 years old this year, which is pretty up there. The oldest quarterback on record to play in the NFL was 42 years old. And I'll kind of get into some of the questions in terms of age and longevity at the quarterback position. But those are just a couple things to kind of get into at the end of the video. But for right now, I think we should just look at what his production was coming out of college, and ultimately what he looked like coming out of college based on data, and then of course get into what his NFL career looked like up to this point, and then talk a little bit about how many more years he could possibly play based on what's happened in the past in terms of past quarterbacks. Because I think it's a very interesting sort of question to everybody brings it up. How much longer Tom Brady play? But there actually is some historical basis for, maybe not complete and utter concern, because most of these quarterbacks that ultimately had to retire had, reasons. They had individual reasons, which Tom Brady has not really shown the signs of yet. But it is something to consider in the back of your mind in terms of his career and his longevity. So with all that stuff out of the way, the main sort of metric point that you should be familiar with is FBS production score. The FBS production score is essentially, it takes into account the touchdown to interception ratio, the completion percentage measured against peers with a 10-year sample. So when I'm talking about Tom Brady's production, I'm not comparing Tom Brady's production to quarterbacks that played in 2016 because that's just not very bright, because it's a completely different college football scenario. There's different variables involved. Touchdown to interception ratios have increased significantly in the since Tom Brady was playing college football. Completion percentages have increased completely in terms of the time period that Tom Brady played. And besides that, you want to be comparing quarterbacks within the era in which they were playing, because it just makes sense to do so, because we're not trying to see what so-and-so quarterback looked like 20 years ago compared to now. We're trying to figure out what he looked like in the time period he was playing to see if there's any pattern for quarterbacks who play in any particular period of play compared to their peers. So this is what does that, is the 10-year sample size for each performance. And the last part of it is strength of schedule. Strength of schedules is essentially the same data which comes from College Football Reference if you want to look up what strength of schedule is. And that strength of schedule is also compared to every single strength of schedule since the 1958 NFL draft class, giving one score. And it's a good sort of measure to see, okay, how tough was the strength of schedule, the strength of competition, it helps quarterbacks who play against tough opponents, because if you play against tough opponents, you're not going to put up the same type of statistics that another quarterback probably might be able to put up against lesser opponents. Because there's always some guy from the MAC or from some other level of competition who puts up crazy gaudy numbers. But when you actually look at the strength of competition they're playing, oftentimes it explains why. It doesn't take away the fact that they put up gaudy numbers. It's just something to put in the back of your mind as an evaluator, that he performed really well, put up a lot of numbers, but he also put up a lot of numbers against relatively weak competition overall in terms of their statistics. So with all that stuff out of the way, let's get to what Tom Brady looked like in terms of his college production, and of course how he looked like in terms of the NFL. And basically what he looked like as a prospect coming out of college is the basic sort of thing to unlock and look at with him. So when it comes to Tom Brady coming out of college, he had a 97.77 FBS stat score. That was his highest statistics score. Based on my data since the 1958 NFL draft class, 100% of long-term starting quarterbacks hit at least a 26 or higher in terms of the FBS stat score. 26 or higher quarterbacks, just so you're familiar, these are like low-end quarterbacks like Jake Delhomme, Jeff Garcia. A lot of the quarterbacks that are in that low-end range of things are quarterbacks that typically, weren't the best quarterbacks ever. And then we get to multiple Pro Bowl quarterbacks. The majority of multiple Pro Bowl quarterbacks since 1958 hit at least 80 or higher in terms of their FBS stat score. The only quarterbacks to not hit multiple Pro Bowls with this, basically the quarterbacks who did not hit 80 and went to multiple Pro Bowls were three quarterbacks. And those quarterbacks were Drew Bledsoe, Brett Favre, and Matt Hasselbeck. So there's only been three quarterbacks since 1958 who hit below an 80 score and ended up becoming a multiple Pro Bowl quarterback. And with multiple All-Pro quarterbacks, again, this is 4 All-Pro considerations, 5 All-Pro considerations. This is pretty much every single Hall of Famer too is pretty much in this group, and 100%, the majority at least, of all those multiple All-Pro quarterbacks, with the exception of Brett Favre, hit at least a 90 or higher in terms of their FBS stat score. Again, there's only been one multiple All-Pro quarterback to not hit 90 or higher, and that was Brett Favre. That's it. There's only been one guy. That's it. One dude. So it's a very high standard to make. It basically shows where the majority of these players ended up, because it is a very good indicator of potential, because since the majority of these players ended up in these particular thresholds, this is what you're trying to find. You're trying to find quarterbacks that are going to be like the majority of quarterbacks. And with Tom Brady's case, he pretty much exceeded every single threshold. He hit the long-term starter threshold, he hit the Pro Bowl threshold, and he hit the All-Pro threshold. And with a 97.77, is really good. I mean, there's nothing else to really say. Coming out of college, he had All-Pro potential based on his FBS stat score. When you actually look at his FBS stat score on an individual basis, a big reason for this is because he played one of the toughest schedules in college football in the last 50 years. The 1999 season with Tom Brady was by far one of the toughest schedules any quarterback has ever had to play, and he played relatively decent, really good against that level of competition. So that is a big sort of driver of him, but I think it's a good reason, again, why you need to look at how the quarterback performs against his level of competition, or at least against the strength of schedule, because that can say a lot about their statistics, positively or negatively. If you play a tough competition and you perform at a certain level versus a guy who doesn't play a very tough competition, performs really well, I think those can say different things about those prospects. But bottom line is Tom Brady was a very good college quarterback based on his statistics, and especially when you look at the fact of the strength of schedule that he was facing. On top of that, the Wonderlic test. Now, the Wonderlic is a bit controversial, but there is thresholds since 1999. I didn't go farther past 1999 just because the Wonderlic in general is a very elusive sort of number, and although you can get numbers all the way back to the 80s or even the 70s, there isn't enough data back then. Like, I can get the Wonderlic numbers on the majority of the really good quarterbacks back then, but I can't get the Wonderlic numbers on every single quarterback back then. And because I can't get the Wonderlic on every single quarterback back then yet, anyways, I have incomplete data, and thus I can't use data from the 80s or the 90s to compare to today, because I don't have a full picture of what the average Wonderlic score is in the 80s or is in the 90s, because there's so many missing quarterbacks in the data. However, there is not a lot of missing quarterbacks in terms of 1999 to today. And based on the data from 1999 to today, 100% of multiple All-Pro quarterbacks since 1999 had at least a 28 or higher in terms of the Wonderlic test, and 100% of Pro Bowl quarterbacks since 1999 had at least a 14 or higher in terms of the Wonderlic test. And Tom Brady's Wonderlic score was a 33. So not only did he have All-Pro college production coming out of Michigan, he also hit the Wonderlic score indicative of multiple All-Pro quarterbacks as well. So based on paper, Tom Brady hit every single number that you could possibly want in terms of high-end quarterback play. And despite the fact that he went to the Combine, and everybody knows this photo. I mean, this is the photo of Tom Brady at the Combine, and look how skinny he is, and look how small he is. He's such a small guy, and he's a wimp. He ain't going to become nothing. Based on the data, again, there's no correlation between athletic ability and quarterback play. There are All-Pro quarterbacks that are not athletic. There are quarterbacks who are really athletic who are also good quarterbacks. There's no correlation between athleticism and quarterback play, despite the fact that people keep trumpeting athleticism. I mean, it doesn't hurt to be athletic at the quarterback position. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, sure, if you're athletic at the quarterback position, it can be an advantage. However, when it comes to actually high-end outcomes like All-Pro, Pro Bowl sort of situations, athleticism really doesn't factor into things that much. There really is not much of a difference between being athletic, super athletic, or being not athletic when it comes to the quarterback position in terms of long-term outcomes. So the big thing that I think a lot of people are turned off about Tom Brady is something that really just doesn't matter at the quarterback position. What matters is their production, and of course the Wonderlic, and of course other things like, you know, toughness and football IQ and film and everything else like that. But the bottom line is when it comes to Tom Brady coming out, hit every number that you could want from a quarterback. Then of course we get to his NFL production. Tom Brady was a very good NFL quarterback. I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to say that, but if you look at the majority of his indicators, he has been great when it comes to wins. His third down percentage has been elite. I mean, he had 5 seasons in particular where he had 90+ percentile or higher third down conversion rates, which is amazing, by the way. He did most of it relatively with a less run-heavy offense. I mean, the majority of his career, the offense kind of ran through him. And you saw a big shift from 2007 in particular, where the offense kind of ran more towards, more through him than anything else. And on top of that, he's put some crazy good statistical seasons. His best seasons, by far, at least his best season ever, of course, was 2007, which was an amazing year. But he followed it up in 2010 with a very good year. And in 2016, had a very high-end year. Now, 2016 was, of course, cut short a little bit because he had to miss games due to the whole, Deflategate stuff. But even with that taken into consideration, it was still a very good sort of performance during that particular season. So the bottom line is Tom Brady's been a very good NFL quarterback. I mean, there's no other way around it. Statistically speaking, he's been very good. This sort of what people tell you is true. The only issue, and again, this just gets into age, is that he is getting up there in age. He is 39 years old. And the one thing I've noticed at the quarterback position, and this is actually every single quarterback that was 39 years old to the highest age in terms of how long they played. The oldest quarterback to play in the NFL since 1958 was Warren Moon. and that of course is to play and actually have a full season of play. So we're talking, where they basically played for the majority of the season, either 12 games or more. And only one quarterback's been able to see 42. There's been a couple quarterbacks that were 41. But the biggest thing I think you can see here, based on the quarterbacks within this age range, is that not a lot of them really performed that well. There definitely were a few who had some of their best seasons ever. Of course, Tom Brady just had his best season, one of his better seasons ever in 2016. But you also have a lot of even guys like Peyton Manning kind of breaking down. Of course, Brett Favre had one of his best seasons ever at age 40, and he followed it up with one of his worst seasons ever in 2010, and then eventually had to retire. But the bottom line is age is a factor in things, and I think if you actually look at the splits, Brett Favre had one of his best seasons ever, of course, as a 40-year-old, and then in 2010 had one of his worst. Of course, that was all injury related, but still, it's a thing to keep in mind. Of course, Peyton Manning. I honestly think that this might be closer to what Tom Brady experiences. Is Peyton Manning's sort of thing where, Peyton Manning had a really high-end year in 2013, had a downer year. I mean, it wasn't like a down year, but statistically speaking, it was less than what he did in 2013, and then ultimately in 2015 his body just gave out and he wasn't able to throw anymore. A lot of that had to do with nerve issues with him, but I do think it's something just to think of and keep in the back of your mind when it comes to Tom Brady, is he's getting to that age when quarterbacks break down. And then the last sort of player to highlight, of course, Warren Moon. Warren Moon had one of his best years in 1995 at 39 years old, and then he had a big regression year in 1996, had a okay year in 1997 at 41 years old, and then at 42 he had kind of had a year and ultimately retired after that. And Warren Moon is a Hall of Famer, by the way, so just so you don't know. So I'm basically comparing Tom Brady to other Hall of Famers in terms of this age range. Now, what does this mean? Ultimately, I don't really know what to say because, these are all a case-by-case basis. Brett Favre had, he took a beating in the New Orleans game and just wasn't able to recover after that. In terms of the playoff game against New Orleans, I mean, it really took a toll on his body. He just was not able to recover in the offseason. And, of course, Peyton Manning, of course, had a degenerative sort of nerve issue that just never really got back to where it needed to be. Basically, he just kind of deteriorated in terms of his strength. And, of course, Warren Moon just kind of got old. So this is not to say that Tom Brady is just going to have this crazy decline like these other quarterbacks. I honestly think that he might have more of a Warren Moon-ish kind of into his career. But it's just to point out the fact that even Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Peyton Manning is a Hall of Famer. Brett Favre is a Hall of Famer. Peyton Manning will be a Hall of Famer. But everybody can agree on that, I think. And of course, Brett Favre and Warren Moon, those are Hall of Famers as well. Even quarterbacks that are like that, they will definitely have seasons in their elder age, basically at the older end of their career where they perform like crazy, put up crazy statistics. However, they usually have a regression, and a lot of times you never really see, that's the big thing, you never really see it coming. They have one of the best years of their career at a very young age, and then ultimately they kind of just quickly their body just gives out on them and there's nothing they can do. And not to say that that's going to be the same case for Tom Brady, but it is just something to think about, is that Tom Brady's best days are numbered, at the very least. And it's just something to keep in mind in the future with Tom Brady, that he definitely could come in this year, have a great season, because there really isn't anything to point towards regression. He's not really had, there definitely has been the sort of concussion stuff, but every quarterback has concussion stuff. But there hasn't been, he hasn't had a major surgery. He of course had the knee sort of injury, but he hasn't really had a knee scope or anything else. Like I haven't heard, or it hasn't really been reported that he's had like a knee scope or something like that that's bothering him. He hasn't really had a shoulder sort of thing, in terms of a spinal sort of neck fusion, like Peyton Manning. So he hasn't really had stuff like that, but it is just something to keep in the back of your mind, to think about is, Tom Brady and how many more years we have to enjoy him, because, he has been a great quarterback, probably been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I probably would do a video on who are the actual best quarterbacks since at least 1958. But he's been a very good quarterback, but he is getting to that point where the odds are not in his favor, in terms of how many more high-end seasons he can put up. And a lot of it just has to do with the body. Now, he could go out there and continue to perform at a high level, in his 40s and 41 to 42. And that would be amazing, if he was able to actually play into his mid 40s. That'd be crazy if he could do it. With the sort of advances in modern medicine, that would also be kind of interesting if he actually was able to accomplish something like that. But again, it's just something to keep in mind, that compared to past quarterbacks who were in this position, something happened. The health just declined tremendously. And I hope that isn't the case for him this year. I hope he continues to play at a high level. But again, it's just something to keep in the back of your mind with him. So again, my name is James Coburn. You can find my work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well if anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.